So I just listened to a talk by Dennett on the panpsychism, discussing, among various things, his philosophy, not the philosophy of religion, philosophy of mind, overall physicalist and reductionist accounts of all these things, which is, fantastic. He has some pretty interesting things to say, in part because of his telling inability to have any real flexibility with regard to these subjects, and his seemingly unendingly tenuous hold of the physicalist position. He's a great steel man for this position, if there is to be anyone to think about with regard to it. But there's one thing I wanted to talk about with regard to that interview, which was Dennett's take on Philip Goff's panpsychist attempts, the attempt to bring panpsychism into the broader physicalist framework. And it's interesting because I have my own criticism of Philip Goff, but I think that one thing that's left out of this entire discussion is pretty important to acknowledge, and that's how, if we just consider consciousness for just a moment, one of the problems that we've had in the past is, or has been, considering consciousness within a purely naturalistic framework, which leaves it as a sort of mystery. The hard problem, if we're not going to take a dualist approach, leaves the actual experiential and subjective and intrinsic components of consciousness, words that someone like Dennett doesn't like, especially he says, let's cut out this word intrinsic. If we leave consciousness within a naturalistic framework without seeing consciousness not as some growth out of nature, but as nature, we're just making it harder on ourselves in so many ways. I think the more interesting question to ask is, how are consciousness and nature perfectly aligned? And how is the physicalist leaving so much out of the account of even nature? I've wrote about these things, and I will continue to do so, but it's not against any kind of physicalist conception. It's more so trying to complete that project, and not in any kind of reductive way, but in considering something like more of a totality. And in a way, best of luck with that, right? But just a few thoughts.